All right, so now that the dust has officially settled, Crawford Canelo has commenced. We have to talk about where each of these guys are going to go in their next fight. Now, Canelo Alvarez has a deal with Turki Al-Sheikh that I believe has 2 more fights remaining on his contract that was worth a collective of $450 million. He got paid a career payday last Saturday night, not even including the proceeds that come from, you know, his other endorsements, and then he's got his deal with Azteca in Mexico. And Terence Crawford reportedly walked away, I think, a guaranteed $50 million. Don't quote me, but needless to say, these guys walked away with career paydays. So now really the question becomes, where do they go from here? They're clearly at the very end of their careers. Terence Crawford this month is turning 38. Canelo Alvarez will be turning 35. Quite honestly, man, these are 2 of the last batch of fighters of, you can argue, the previous era, because we're getting into this new era of, you know, the Shakur Stevensons, the Teofimo Lopez's, you know, Gervonta Davis when he decides to come back and, you know, fight some boxers. And then the newer crop of guys, the Abdullah Masons, the Richardson Hitchens, and a host of other fighters that are going to be the new crop of stars, right? And now, you know, we're hearing about Shakur and Teofimo likely fighting in the early part of next year. So it's signaling that boxing is going to like turn the page now, and now it's going to be up to these young fighters, you know, to fight each other. But with Canelo and Crawford, clearly the last 2 big, and I want to call Canelo an American star only because he's fought predominantly in the United States. He made most of his money in the United States, and he's considered, he's Mexican, but he's an American-based fighter. And you really have to look at how much he has left following this fight, and whether or not he wants to just finish off these 2 remaining fights with Turki Al-Sheikh that are going to be reportedly in a range of $175 million. I mean, that's a lot of money to still be making. But coming off this fight, and it's why I didn't want to hop the cliff and talk about each of these guys' next fights until last Saturday commenced, you know, just to be fair, because we didn't know how the fight was going to end up. So being as now we saw how the fight culminated and Terence Crawford getting a clear unanimous decision and a career win for him, you know, you have to look at the immediate for each guy and try to picture what makes the most sense for them. Now, I'll start with Terence Crawford, okay? Terence Crawford, if you were to tell us like 5 years ago that he was going to be the undisputed super middleweight champion, we probably be, you know, all of us collectively would be saying like, you're crazy. But here we are, right? In 2025, Terence Crawford is the undisputed super middleweight champion. Now, does he stay here? Does he fight a couple fights and then call it a career? Or does he perhaps go down to 160 and grab a 6th division world title when you got champions like Janibek, Erislandy Lara, Carlos Adames, who he's had history sparring with? Crawford has options. Now, it's really whether or not he wants to get up for those fights, because truthfully, he's not going to make that kind of money fighting those guys as what he made this past Saturday night. From a historic standpoint, you know, for him to go to middleweight and grab a title there would just be, you know, the cherry on top. You know, he really doesn't have to do it. If he retired today, I don't think most people, and I say most, would be hard-pressed considering he was written off going all the way up to fight Canelo, and being as how that fight ended, you know, even the most jaded fan had to tip their hat and say, hey, man, like, salute. So we'll have to see what Terence Crawford and team decide to do. There were some rumblings about potentially staying at 168, but none of us really know, and I don't think we're going to know perhaps until like maybe the end of the year going into early next year. Now, really the big question is, what does Canelo do from here? There were also some rumblings about a rematch clause and you know, they're gonna run this back. I always leave the door open to be proven wrong, but something tells me that this was a one and done. And with how the fight culminated, I don't think they run this back. I think Canelo at this stage, like I said, he's got 2 fights left on this Riyadh, you know, contract that he made with Turki Al-Sheikh. That was like a reported $450 million. He made, I think, like 100 something, like well over $100 million this past Saturday, and his next couple of fights, he's looking at close to $100 million for each of those fights, no matter who he fights. So the plan initially was to fight Shiraz, right? Is that fight attractive still? You know, it's clearly for Shiraz. He'll still take a Canelo fight, but does Canelo himself get up for that fight? None of us really know mentally where Canelo was at this point, and whether or not he would want to even entertain a fight like that. But when you look at the landscape of 168 pounds, there's really not a lot to pick from, per se. Now, you know, you still have Jamal Charlo lingering around there that never really got a shot at Canelo Alvarez, and it really would be for nothing. There would be no belts on the line or anything, and it would just kind of be 2 veterans at this stage, you know, arguably enough, the same age, fighting each other in a fight that, quite honestly, should have happened years ago. And, you know, some people still suggest that Canelo should go up to light heavyweight. Personally, I don't think he should do that. I would not be mad if Canelo fought like a middleweight coming up, or anybody like, or even like a Chris Eubank Jr., the winner of the Conor Benn. Eubank Jr. wins, I wouldn't mind that. I wouldn't mind that. It's a lot of money for Canelo that he could fight in the UK, like he's always talked about wanting to do. I just personally feel Canelo is essentially done fighting the elites of the elites. He's clearly not going to fight Benavidez. I do not see him going to fight Dimitri Bivol. And then when you look at the rest of the landscape, unless guys like Carlos Adames, Erislandy Lara wants to take a rematch going up to 168, or like I mentioned with the Eubank Jr., if he beats Conor Benn, you know, next month, I guess, you know what I'm saying, or is it in 2 months? Sure, you know, I just think Canelo really showed, man, like we've seen his best days, and I just don't feel he is in line to fight a super elite level fighter at 168, 175, or even 160, depending, I guess, if one of these champions move up. So let me know what you think. Where does Terence Crawford go from here? Who would you like to see him fight next? And where does Canelo Alvarez go from here? Does he retire after these last remaining fights? If you were to ask me, it probably would be the best bet. And to be honest with you, with Terence Crawford, I would probably suggest the same. A title defense, or you know, try to get that middleweight title if you want. If that's what you choose to do. But I think we're looking at the very end of both Canelo and Crawford's careers. So let me know in the comment section, like, subscribe, and I'll be back.